I've made a start on the weapons loadout I'm doing and the drop tanks. I like to get this done earlier on in the build. If you saw my Phantom build, I explained I don't really like that part of modern aircraft. All the weapons, it's just so just gluing all tiny fins on and decals and whatnot. So I do it earlier on to keep motivated, so I get it done, don't leave it till the last thing, otherwise the novelty wears off by then. Drop tanks, I'm putting 3 on. I like the look of aircraft with drop tanks. The 2 halves you put, there's polycaps that come with the kit. The polycaps go inside, there's like a groove slot, they go in, they hold there. And the pylons, they've got, so that one, they got steel pins that come with the kit. They same thing, they sit in a groove. You got to really jam them in there, they're really tight fit. And once they glue together, they just push in. I'm guessing their theory behind this is if you want to swap out your weapons loadout, you can just plug them different ones in. I'm not, once I put it together, that's how it stays, so I'm not fussed about that, so I'll just be gluing them on probably. For weapons, I'm using the smaller GBUs, the GBU 12s. I still got to put the Seeker head on it. There's 2 halves, and you got these, the front fins are 2 sections that glue in, then they got a bit of a gap around them that need putty, and the rear fins, the 4 fins glue on, but the slot for the fin is wider than the actual fin, so they're going to need a bit of putty in areas as well, so they weren't great fitting. The AIM 120s are just a single piece, so it's all molded in one with the fins, which is great for someone who, like me, who just said, hey, it's putting weapons together. All you got to do is glue the rail on. And I'm using AIM 9Xs on the loadout, so I still got to put the clear part Seeker head on. Same again, it was a single piece, so you just put the rail in. And I've started the AN ASQ 228, the infrared laser guidance system. There's 2 clear parts for this infrared section. What I've done is I've put black paint on the inside of the lens, so that you can see like glass on the outside. I'll mask that off after I've cleaned up the seam line where I glued them together, and that way it looks a bit more, it looks better than if I just put paint on the outside. I've fitted these 2 plates on the belly. These are the intake where it joins the actual intake, so it's like the lip on the outside that slots in. And it's got a nice flush seam join, which is really good. The actual intakes, I've still got to clean up the inside. There's you can see a seam line on the join. I've got to putty and clean that up. I'll do the rear as well, but you're not really going to see it. But I'll clean up where I can see, get to anyway. And then once I paint them, clean up the seam, paint it white, I can glue them in, and I can start getting the fuselage together. And I've also glued the nose section into the cockpit tub. So I've just got to clean up the seam join yet, but it's unavoidable. You got details where on that seam join that are gonna need touching up scribe wise when it's cleaned up. So bit of progress. For the seam line inside the intake, I've used Tamiya white putty. I'll just apply it with a toothpick, put it on and run it along the seam. Cleaning it up, because it's long, it's hard to get at. You can use a sanding stick like this one, but it flexes, so it's not gonna get at it properly. So I cut some sanding sponge in the strip and just use tweezers, pinch it. That way you can reach right in there. It's it may not be the prettiest way of doing it, but it's just the way I do it. It gets at it how I want to and cleaned it up. And then you can use different grade sponge to fine it down and then spray it in. Another way, if it's a round intake on some aircraft, I'll use sandpaper, like fine grade, and you can wrap it around a paintbrush or whatever, something round just to get in there, and same basis. Right, intakes are cleaned up, painted white, glossed. It's the intake fan, the first stage fan. It just plugs into the back, and just a bit of glue to hold it in. So I've put the intake in, and now I'm putting the airframe piece, which is the opposite of that one, in. It's really tight up in here, so what I'm going to do, it doesn't like want to sit in position nice and flush everywhere. So I've started at the back, and I'm going to glue it in sections, work my way around till I get it in best I can. I'm thinking, from what I've seen, there's probably going to be a little bit of a gap there, so I'll use a bit of putty if that's the case. Instructions say to paint that inside area before you put it in, which is probably a good idea because it's hard to get at, but my take on it is when I glue it, it's going to mess up the paint, so I'm just going to glue it in. I'll mask the white off, and then I'll paint in the colour when I'm painting the aircraft. Yeah, it will be hard to get at, but like I said, I don't want to mess up. Paint it, then glue it, and then it squishes out and eats away at the paint. Right, intakes are on, and the outer skin of the fuselage. This side fit better than this side. There's a slight lip, but I'm going to sand both of them anyway, because that I don't think is the natural panel line on the aircraft from images I could try and see on the internet. So I'll take that out and then just put back in the that's a panel line and that's a panel line, but I don't think that should be there, so I'm going to take them out. I was left with, you see there's a bit of a gap through here. Same again, this is going to be cleaned up, no panel line there, so I'm going to take them out. That's a panel line obviously, but I'll just putty that up. I'll put some Tamiya tape to protect the detail, and I'm going to use perfect plastic putty over it. I'll let it set overnight, and then because it's water soluble, just rub it back. I don't want to get in there with the Tamiya white putty, because then you got to sand it. I don't want to damage those details. And like I said, there's just a bit of a gap there, bit of perfect plastic putty in that one as well. The next step will be putting the top fuselage on, which is here. So there's polycaps and the plastic parts to sit in here for the stabilizers to plug into before the top goes on. But before you put the top on, you got to put the nose in. I've tried, excuse my mess, I've tried I put to see how the top fits to the bottom, and then I had a look at the nose. It won't fit. You got to put the nose in first, which should, that's why. Alright, there's two pieces that protrude out of the cockpit tub, so you got to make sure they're under. It doesn't want to fit for some reason. There we go. And then it plugs in. You got these slots that it plugs into. Seems pretty good fit, dry fit anyway. And then your top goes on. There's, you got the plugs on the that go in, and then the sides just sit in. I'm not putting it on just yet because I don't want to pull it apart again, but it sits through there. And again, that seam will be something that I need to remove because it's not a natural seam line in the aircraft. So it's going to be pretty impressive size when that's all on. Before I glue the nose onto the fuselage, it'll be easier to do the doors while it's in a shorter length. So when you do a model, you want to do it gear up. Most of the time they're manufactured that to display wheels down, so the gear doors open, so they're not necessarily going to fit if you want to do it closed. Some might, but not always. I use a bit of old white tack because you can give it force and it'll squash down to where you want it. When I put the doors in, this, I'm not doing it yet, I'm just showing you how I go about it. Maneuver it until you're happy with its flush. That's not quite right yet, but, and then just glue it in. That door's pretty good. The next one along is not as good. This is what I'm talking about. They're not made to be shut. So if we put it flush, you can see you're left with a gap. And while we want a seam line, we don't want a big gap like that. So what I'll do is I've got some 0.1 plastic card. I'll cut it and glue it on that edge. If that then becomes too wide, then all you do is just sand it down until it fits, and that'll take care of that gap. Also, obviously, it's made for gear open. You got the mechanisms for the open close, so you got to remove them. So you just cut them off so it'll fit in. And the same thing, I haven't checked this one yet, so there's another little piece that's got to go on the other side, so I'll have to put them both in and check before I go gluing, adding thickness to it and that. So that's just sort of how, I'm just showing you how I approach it. I'm sure there's other ways, but that's just how I do it. So I'm cleaning up the targeting pod. As I mentioned that I'd mask off the lens. I use Mr. Masking Sol R. I think there's another type. There's two types. I think I use this one. But it's it's got a big brush on it, so I usually just lift it out, stand that there, I'll knock it over. I lift it up and get some off on the toothpick, just enough what I need, and then just blob it on and just spread it out to the lens and just leave it. I'll leave it upright so it dries properly. It doesn't spread over where I want it to. So that is a really good product. I use that heaps.